Welcome to Power Your Story, a podcast produced by high school students in Chicago with the support of After School Matters. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Open Mind Thursday. Today we have Jules to talk about one topic.
Hi, I'm Jules, and my topic is going to be about decolonizing the curriculum and being more inclusive about it. So this is a thing that I've been talking around. My school has a student voice committee, so we're talking about adjusting the history curriculum and the sex ed curriculum and making it more inclusive. I guess this is more open for everyone. I want you guys to tell me what decolonizing the curriculum and being more inclusive means to you, and what are some things you think should be taught in schools, for both history or sex ed? For me, personally, decolonizing the curriculum is not trying to erase all white history, but trying to not really teach it as much because we focus on it so much. And when it comes to teaching about the civil rights movement or slavery, we only focus on the negative parts of it instead of talking more about people of color and talking about their accomplishments as well. Because when we talk about things that has to do with them, it's mostly negative things or how they got their rights instead of talking about what they have done and certain role models and their places as well. An example could be Christopher Columbus. We've always been taught since we were kids, we've been taught that he was such a great person. He did all these amazing things for us. But in reality, as I grew up, I learned that he was not really a good person. I don't want to use certain words, but he took advantage of Native Americans and used it for his own benefit. He also and to this day, the things he has done and his people have done still affect Indigenous people to this day because their lands are still endangered and there's more effects to it. So we're trying to be more inclusive and talk more about Indigenous people or people of color and talk more about their achievements and praise them. Well, not praise them, but make sure we talk about the good things of them. And yeah, that's pretty much what I've in my view. That's how I see it.
They actually changed his day. Instead of Christopher Columbus Day, it's Indigenous Peoples Day now. But I know that I took a college history course about Latin American history, and they did say something about the history not being fully told about Christopher Columbus and what he actually did. So I do agree with the fact that schools should include that history along with current history, the past history, so that they can make their own judgments instead of just being told one way and just going with it. Because I had to seek it out and sign up for a class in order to find out more details about Latin American history. But I think they should include it in the curriculum, like Jules says.
Well, I think one reason why schools don't really talk about people of color is maybe because in the past schools aren't new to this topic and they don't know how to teach it, and because one school doesn't know how to teach about people of color, other schools started following this school and it's just started being like that.
Honestly, I agree with Jules because we don't talk people too much color. We talk the same thing over and over.
Yeah, so it just reminds me of a quote I heard. I forgot from where, but it says history is written by victors. So the history that we know and that we're taught is written by the people who won, the people who, I guess, well, in this case, it's the how do you say it? Well, white people, you can say. And so white history, you could say, is the victors in this case because they're the ones that are telling their point of view of history. So we don't really know the history of other minorities. So I think that's why we don't really get to learn it in school as much as we should.
In my freshman year, I was actually told that Christopher Columbus wanted to go to Asia, but instead he arrived at North America, which ended up discovering a new continent. And the American Civil War and the Confederacy ended up happening. Why? Because the Confederacy wanted slaves and the North, they didn't want slaves. And the Jim Crow laws happened because America was racist back then, that they didn't like people of color back then, so they had to segregate schools. There was just black churches and everything. There's just so many stuff going on back then. Some schools, so a bit in in Chicago. But some say that we're still segregated to this day, though. I mean, like in some schools in this state that we live in.
Well, actually, I know that Governor J.B. Pritzker, he signed something that public schools will start learning about Asian American history in the next year or this year. I don't remember when, but that's a big step from what we have so far. And I know some teachers are starting to implement some discussions about this topic in their classes, but I know like not overall the whole CPS school system has improved that much in their curriculum.
Okay, so one of my concerns for like the sex ed curriculum is that most schools when like we're taught about sex ed, it's about like promoting abstinence, safe sex, and like preventing teen pregnancy. But the thing is that some schools actually don't really go deep into like covering those things. They tell us about like the contraceptives like condoms, birth control, and all these things, but they don't really tell us where to access these things and like where to get them from. So like, what do you guys think should be like taught in schools as well? Because we're also taught mostly about heterosexual relationships instead of being more LGBTQ inclusive. Because there's like kids who like might be interested in those things and like don't know where to learn things from. So yeah, that's overall like, what I've noticed.
So I also agree that the sex ed curriculum is like, I feel like it's so old school because it sets a unrealistic expectation on how teens are like, oh, you should practice abstinence and make sure you use a condom and like get birth control. And I also agree with that you should practice all the things, but they don't give you like the resources to actually like fully understand it. It's like, oh yeah, do this. Now what? Like they don't really guide you. They just tell you to do it. It's more like a command rather than like explaining it. And also, I also agree on how heterosexual relationships, like in this society, like now society is like more like openly inclusive to like LGBTQ. And like, what if like other people want to like experiment with that? The school should also be like teaching them about like how to practice that.
All right. So first of all, if there's any background noise, please excuse me. Like I said, I was at the airport. And second of all, to add on to Ada's point about teaching about like different like LGBTQ and like stuff like that, I feel like that's also something that isn't really brought up. Like usually it's sexual education that like people go into that kind of stuff, like about like LGBTQ and like what it means to like, you know, be transgender or like boys or like women. And like, I feel like one thing that isn't really incorporated into that is kind of like appreciating that and like embracing that. It's like sort of more into like the, I guess you could say, informational side, like basically just what that is. And I think it's really important that we should also incorporate that into that education because it's a good environment to sort of go deeper into those things, like deeper into that concept.
When I was in my senior year of high school, I teach freshman sex ed. It was hard to teach that. Then
you taught it?
In my high school, they give me 20 kids to teach sex ed. Some people doesn't know how to use I don't want to say the word condom or chopper or the pills. And I make some food for the kids.
Okay, so I do agree on like having information on like how to be more safe and how to use certain things for like having resources in general. But I don't know, like I get that we want to be more LGBT community friendly, and I totally agree with that. But I feel like including it into the mainstream sex education would kind of it would confuse a lot of younger kids that are still trying to learn themselves. And like when you're young and you're a teenager, you're still already confused to begin with. So like adding more to it about like different titles and like that can confuse a person more. I'm not saying that they shouldn't find themselves later on, but I'm saying that for the people that do want to find out more about all like the different LGBTQ communities and like the different genders and things like that, they can offer that as like an extra curriculum for those who are interested and seek it out. At least that's my opinion.
All right, I actually want to counteract my earlier claim and actually agree with Brandon. I actually think that we should actually like exclude it from sexual education curriculum because that isn't exactly the best environment for kids to exactly better understand that stuff after, you know, going over what was in the course like more recently. And I think maybe a better idea would kind of like to be set aside for like a separate course in school. So like basically maybe in like the first earlier years of like, usually when they set the time for kids to start learning about sexual education, maybe to spend that time. And then once they've kind of like learned all that, maybe after that in earlier years when kids are starting to like kind of understand a little bit more what their hobbies are and what they want to do and what they want to be, to incorporate that kind of course.
Actually, thank you for like giving your guys' opinions with this, because this is something I'm like currently working towards, like to like add in my school and like adjust the curriculum. So like hearing everybody's opinions, I feel like I have a better outlook at like what should be added and what shouldn't. I think that's pretty much it.
Power Your Story podcast is produced by students at After School Matters with production support from the Creative Impostor Studios.
Follow Power Your Story in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. You can leave us a review in Apple Podcasts.
Find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Power Your Story Podcast.
Got a question or suggestions for our show? Contact us, poweryourstorypodcast.com. Thank you for listening. Ciao.